Welcome to the thrilling world of Security Squawk, where we explore cybersecurity. Guiding you through online threats, we'll aid you in understanding safety protocols and trends. Meet our gurus, Brian from Exact IT, Reginald from Arc Solvers, and Randy from Tech Rescue. Together, we'll delve into current events and hot cybersecurity topics, helping you comprehend their impact. Stay informed, stay secure. Security Squawk, the business of cybersecurity. Buckle up, let's dive in.
There it is. Buckle up. What's up, guys? Welcome to another week of the Security Squawk podcast. I am Brian here with Randy, and I have no idea where Andre just went.
I'm here. I hit the wrong cable on my.
Well,
Uh-oh. Windows problems.
Technical difficulties to kick off the show here on a early Tuesday. So this week on the Cybersecurity Squawk podcast, we are going to dive into the latest on the Oracle. I don't know. It seems like breaches. It seems like there might be multiple entities. One Oracle seems to be admitting to, and the other one we're still not so sure that they're admitting to either yet. But we'll talk about the one they are admitting to, because that's what we have information on. And also going to jump into, I don't know why I'm seeing these other articles, but anyway, the cyber threats, as we talked about, are not down. And we're going to talk about 3 different situations where that has proven to be true here in the last week, where we have some information on how long it takes for a company to deal with an event, along with healthcare providers remaining highly vulnerable to ransomware attacks, and Sam's Club investigating their own Clop ransomware breach claim. And they're not so sure if they have been hit by this ransomware group or not, which is a interesting trend that we've been seeing lately, with companies being completely unaware that they're breached, and the cyber criminals are the ones to go public with it and announce it, only for the company to say, just like we're seeing with Oracle, well, we weren't hit or we weren't breached. And then a few weeks later, they announced that they definitely were breached. So we'll dive into that. We'll talk about those things. And Checkpoint, they're also another company denying a breach as well. So we'll see and dig into what's happening there. And we'll also dive into a story about a local doctor, or a small doctor in a small business hit by ransomware, and essentially saying that IT isn't doing their job. So we'll dive into why this doctor thinks IT isn't doing his job. And we'll also talk about a fake Zoom epidemic that's kind of plaguing businesses and employees, and why it's happening in the first place, and what you should really be doing to prevent these ridiculous kinds of attacks from happening to you and your business. So that's the rundown for the show today. We got it scrolling across the bottom. Remember, we love engagement, so just hit the chat up if you're watching us on YouTube. We also can see the comments on Facebook and LinkedIn. We appreciate the engagement, the likes, the shares, the subscribes. This is a free show with no ads, and we will continue to do so as long as you continue to help us grow the show organically by engaging with us. Right, guys? That's all we ask for. Right, Randy?
That's right.
Randy likes engagement. He's the king of engagement. Calls it free beer. It's like free beer.
Right.
So we have this Oracle situation, guys. Very interesting that I don't know how in tune you are to what is happening with Oracle the last week or so, but Oracle Health has admitted to a breach. There's also another breach going on out there that's kind of out of bounds for the show for today, but there is something else out there with Oracle, and potentially the same Oracle cloud infrastructure that runs a lot of the AI applications that are out there, potentially also being breached. But this is their healthcare kind of like segment of Oracle Health, it's known as. And they are or they're a major provider of health IT solutions. They have confirmed a data breach at this point, and it has affected multiple U.S. hospitals. And the breach has involved a legacy server accessed using stolen credentials, and it had sensitive private data on it. And Oracle Health has begun notifying affected hospitals and providers. But the full extent of the damage remains unclear at this point because we really don't know what medical records were actually stolen as a result of this. But this incident highlights vulnerabilities in the healthcare IT system and also the challenges of securing legacy infrastructure on Oracle's part. The other interesting thing I found out about this, guys, is they're kind of, Oracle Health is kind of taking a page out of the Power Schools playbook here in terms of how they're making the hospitals kind of deal with the data breach on their own. And they're really just advising the hospitals on how to handle the situation with their patients. When at the end of the day, it wasn't really the hospital's fault or problem, but Oracle Health is, instead of taking responsibility and handling the notifications themselves on the hospital's behalf, they're going to the hospitals and kind of coaching them and saying like, well, here's what you have to do, right? And they're leaving it up to the hospitals. And I said it with the Power Schools, I'll say it here, I don't think that's the proper way for these SaaS providers to be handling these things.
I think it's two reasons. A, it's because the hospital has a relationship with the patient. So all of a sudden you get a letter with a letterhead of Oracle, you're going to be like, what the heck is this? I've never used Oracle in my life. And then second is the lawsuits, because it's better for the hospitals to say, hey, even if they say it's a third party, it doesn't matter, because now the client is going to, or the patient is going to be like, well, I went to you, I didn't go to Oracle. And you deal with Oracle, but I'm dealing with you, type of thing.
And it has an effect basically of deflecting some of the anger or whatever away from Oracle and deflecting it down towards the local hospitals. And it kind of sets the tone. I'm not saying this is right, Brian, but it kind of sets the tone next time there's a breach, like, hey, next time there's a breach, we're going to give you all the information you need to deal with your customers. Don't send them to us and all that. So it has a kind of a double barrel effect there of doing that, Brian. It's like I said, I don't think it's right or good necessarily, but it seems like it's doing that.
So let's talk about the legacy system at play here, right? So organizations at some point in their time, as they go through their business, they may come upon a point where they have to deal with a legacy system, right? There's probably lots of businesses that you guys encountered along the way where they've had this system that they couldn't really get rid of, right? Because it performed or was a critical function for that operation, and taking it down means loss of money, right? And taking it down to maybe even just update it means loss of money. So what are some ways that organizations can deal with these legacy systems, if, say, retiring them or moving away from them aren't really an option? Or is that just bad thinking on humanity's part, that we need to, understand that everything has a life cycle and you can't expect things to stick around forever and ever, and businesses should plan for, say, a 5-7 year life cycle for most of their technology?
I think that's a great question. I mean, ultimately, yes, Brian, they need to be moving forward and moving on. We've seen healthcare providers have to keep information for a certain number of years for compliancy reasons. And, the information's on legacy systems that maybe they can't be migrated or whatever. So if you had to have that, you obviously have to move away from it. So on one hand, what you said is exactly right. But on the other hand, you've got the real world where maybe you can't, but you can do things like maybe you cordon those systems off where they can't get on the internet, maybe where they're only accessible from inside the organization, through the web page or whatever accesses that legacy system from inside the organization. That would be a couple things you could do right there. You know, maybe just like give it like segmented access, basically. But even that really puts a big pit in the bottom of my stomach, man, because if it's not being updated, it's really just a danger. And it's going to end up bringing you down if you're not careful.
And in this case, we see that Oracle purchased this company called Cerner that had the old legacy server that they didn't migrate yet to the cloud. And 3 years later is when it happened. But how it happened it's pretty simple. It was just basically compromise credentials, and then from there they just copied the data to a remote server. So it was nothing that it wasn't a lavish attack. It was something very basic that could have been prevented.
Yeah, and you also run into a danger anytime there's a merger or acquisition. So that's when extra care has to be taken. And on top of that, even if there wasn't a merger or acquisition here, there ought to be a regular, a regular review of users, user accounts, data. Goes back to that whole zero trust thing we always talk about. And if somebody doesn't need access, turn it off. They don't need it. And so somebody who's left doesn't need access, they should be turned off. And even if you have the greatest offboarding process in the world set up for your organization, you still ought to have a separate regular review where you're looking at who you have in your system and all that jazz so you can get them turned off just in case you overlooked something, because people make mistakes.
Yes, sorry, Bob. Segmentation is the key point there. That's how you're going to deal with this problem. In most cases, there's other things that you can do, like put them behind zero trust or something along those lines. But I guess the more common thing that most people figure out is how to segment it and how to make sure it doesn't have access to the internet, maybe all the time, maybe just some of the time or none of the time. All right, guys. So another topic to move along to is about business impact and what's happening out there in the world of business when they have to deal with a cyber attack. And contrary to some articles that we read, especially I like how it ebbs and flows, right? Over the years, we've been doing the podcast now for four years or so. And, we see this ebb and flow where, the cyber criminals are way ahead of the game. And then, you start to see stories coming out either from the insurance industry or some other places where they're like, oh, ransomware payments are down, so we must be getting ahead of this problem, right? Mm-hmm. And the three of us know that we're not getting ahead of this problem. There's just various reasons why certain indicators that people like to look at do go down. And they're usually for the wrong reasons that the people writing the stories lay out, as we've pointed out on the show quite a few times. So it's no secret that these ransomware attacks are causing unprecedented disruptions, but average downtimes are reaching about 24 days per incident. So most businesses, when they get hit with a ransomware attack at this point, can expect to be down and have their businesses disrupted for about a month. Mm-hmm. And that just depends on your situation. Some companies, it might be a little bit shorter, and other companies, it might be a lot longer, right? So if some companies are taking 6 months and others are taking 6 weeks, well, it's probably like you're going to be in the neighborhood of like 2 months, right? 1 month is probably, pretty good, I would think, like for most businesses, based on some businesses that we see down for 6 weeks, 2 months, 3 months. Businesses are facing skyrocketing ransom demands, as we see. Last year they were saying ransom demands are going down. No, they're just moving on from the companies that don't want to pay or don't want to entertain to pay, right? They're not sticking around long to talk to those companies. They just move on because they're hitting so many businesses. They just go to the next business, and then like, okay,
Yep.
you're negotiating. Okay, great. Now we're going to negotiate with you, and you're probably going to end up paying 3 times what you would have paid maybe 3 years ago, because they're asking for more when they come across a business that's willing to negotiate and entertain paying the ransom. They understand that there's 2 camps. There's people who will entertain paying the ransom, and there's people who won't, and they're not going to waste their time with those people anymore, because they know it's a huge waste of their time and resources. Businesses are also suffering from the reputational damage more than ever as a result of these cyber attacks, with people choosing to take their business elsewhere after a cyber attack, especially in financial and healthcare areas. And these trends underscore the need for robust cybersecurity strategies that businesses are failing to want to put in place at this time. And these things need to focus on protecting data rather than just the perimeter of their network, which is what most companies seem to have invested their cybersecurity dollars in. Is rather than layers of protection, they decided to just put MFA on the VPNs and the firewalls and things like that. So that's where the focus of the cybersecurity spend occurred. And now cyber criminals are aware of this information, and probably have been for a long time. And they just pivot their strategies to deal with the fact that businesses have beefed up their perimeter security, but what's behind that is very weak.
Yeah, one of the things that really jumps out for me on this article, he says, instead of focusing solely on securing the perimeter, which is kind of the old school way of thinking, that's build a castle, put a moat around it, put all your stuff inside. He said organizations must prioritize protecting the data itself. And that is such a great way to look at it, because if you're working on protecting the data, even if they get across the moat and get in the castle, you're still worried about protecting the data. You're going to have different approaches, because one of the things you want to make sure is that the data doesn't leave the organization, either accidentally or maliciously, right? And so if you're worried and focused on protecting the data, you can build a more robust, basically, platform to be resistant against this kind of ransomware. I think that's a really great point that he makes.
Yeah, and just going back to kind of the title of 24 days on average is a downtime, and then how I was trying to find some articles before, but like Brian, how you mentioned about the insurance companies, they'll give a different report, and you ask a cybersecurity person, they give a different report, because it's all kind of in their perspective. Because insurance companies could say, yeah, attacks are down, we're paying less, because they're not going to, that your clients aren't going to you, and they're not filing claims. They're keeping it under the rug. And then if you ask a cybersecurity professional, he's going to tell you that, 24 days on average. But then if you ask a law firm, they're going to maybe tell you months, because they see how, they see the lawsuits and they see all the other things that's happening to get them back up. So it's all about perspective. Unfortunately, there's no standard in this reporting. So that's why we always have that, up and down type of report.
Yeah. And since we don't really have a cultural shared experience of what a ransomware attack is, because it's still early as far as most of the world's concerned, they've not heard what it's like. Y'all, these 24 days are going to be 24 days of hell. Okay. You're going to be 24 days of losing sleep, working around the clock, or 24 days of not sleeping well because you see what could possibly happen to your business. 24 days of employees entertaining and taking on other jobs and leaving your company, because we don't know. It's not like we start at the beginning and we're like, oh, okay, 24 days and this will be over. When you're in those first, let's say 3 weeks, you don't know how long till you're going to be back up, which means you're probably not accepting payments. You're having trouble making payments, having trouble paying your employees. We're talking 24 days of hell here, Brian, and it's not a pretty sight. And, even though it's just 3.5 weeks, that is a long time in the business world.
I
And we're
agree.
going to see in a later article coming up about a doctor, and he actually gave his, his journey in this as well.
Yeah, I mean, downtime's important, right? Downtime is is really the end of the day. That's the metric when you talk about, we like to talk about the blast radius, right? And reducing the blast radius, right? When you're reducing the blast radius, kind of the product of all of that is your downtime, right? And I think about this. I hear this radio. I listen to this radio show in the morning when I'm getting ready, and I hear this um, commercial on the show quite often. They play it a lot, where it's for a backup provider, and they talk about like how the backup provider is kind of like your golden ticket to defeating and dealing with ransomware attacks. And that's true, yes, and that'll help you get back up and running. But people have to be aware that it's not just about backups anymore, right? They can steal this information and threaten to sell it on the dark web. And if that's something you don't want being resold, or that's something you're going to have to entertain paying as part of the ransomware, right? So it's you can have good backups, and you can still have to pay the ransom if you don't want that data being publicly exposed, or you don't want to have to deal with the ramifications of your customer data ending up in the hands of other people, and then they decide to sue the piss out of you with a class action lawsuit, because that's what we see over and over again. There's literally lawyers who every single data breach that's known to man, they will, we know the one guy because we use him on the show all the time with his articles where he writes about data breaches for the sole purpose of trying to find people who are looking for that information and then potentially sway them into contacting his office for that class action lawsuit, right? So they're out there and they're looking for clients for, something that quite frankly probably occurs more than slips and falls in stores at this point across America, right? Data breaches.
Well,
go ahead.
Well, so it brings up a great point, Brian, that has to be part of the business's strategy. Going back to the comment the man said about data security, part of the business strategy involving data security and focusing on that means you've got to watch, I don't know what to call it. Let's just call it the transparent membrane that's around the entire business, right? You've got to be watching that all the time for data leaving the business. And that's one of the ways that you can know that you're under attack when everything else fails, is that you see data flowing across those pathways, if you will, whether that's across a firewall, coming out of a network, whether that's flowing through the 365 or the Google Workspace. But you've got to make that part of your strategy, that you're watching the data and making sure it's not traveling. Now, it's going to travel at a slow speed. That's the crazy part. It's going to travel at a slow speed because I maybe have to send a presentation to somewhere I'm going to go give a presentation. That's data leaving the organization. So anyway, you got to make that part of your strategy to watch the data and how fast is it leaving, going out of the organization from every possible place, endpoints, 365, across firewalls, etc.
Yes, sir. Thank you for the insight. And moving right along, we have healthcare providers remain highly vulnerable to ransomware attacks. According to this article, healthcare providers continue to be prime targets for ransomware attacks due to outdated infrastructure and high-value patient data. A staggering 95% increase in attacks has been reported in this sector over the past year, with devastating consequences for patient care and operations. We've well documented on this show throughout the year. So obviously, healthcare is an attractive target for cyber criminals, guys, because nobody wants their private health information put out on the internet. There could be various reasons why that is. So where do we see maybe some missteps that healthcare, is doing right now that makes them such a vulnerable target that is successfully attacked, across the board? or what can hospitals do to mitigate these risks, in your opinion?
Well, I want to first again just point out what the beginning says. 90% of healthcare organizations are insecurely connected to the internet and running systems vulnerable to exploitation. Simple. We talked about legacy systems with the Oracle, and we talk about, I think Randy always says about the updates, the boring thing, but it's like the simplest things to do is just to make sure that anything that is old and you still need it is to isolate it, put it around a zero trust, and to just for the IT director to do his damn job.
Yeah, it reminds me of there's an old Bob Newhart clip where the guy comes in, he has a problem, he tells it to the psychologist, and the psychologist says, "Stop." That's it. And the guy's like, "That's what I need to do." And the guy's like, "Well, you want to get over it, right?" And the guy's like, "Yeah." And the psychologist is like, "Then stop." And that's such a great point you just made there, because if 90 something percent are currently dangerous, we got to fix it. Stop doing it. Like, no excuses. So they need to put the money into their budget and patch the stuff, get rid of legacy or whatever. Such a great point, man.
Yeah. 78% of healthcare organizations made ransomware payments of $500,000 or more, 40% between 1 and 5 million. Like, why?
I mean, I know people that work in the healthcare, and you're going to look at that 90%. And, if you don't understand what's actually going on out there, you're going to think that that's a high number. And at the end of the day, I'm not surprised to see that, because, people are constantly telling me things in the hospitals that they're doing, the ways that they're connecting, their own personal devices and things like that. And, it's a culture thing. It's people just don't understand, and nobody's warning these individuals that these particular behaviors are leading to these types of risks, right? That can bring down a whole entire hospital or medical facility, unfortunately. So cyber criminals know it, and they continue to build technology and tools to exploit that, poor cyber hygiene or poor behavior that we see across the board when it comes to, what's going on inside of the healthcare industry. And, to provide some insight and answer some questions as to why does this keep happening? Well, the reality of it is that they just don't do a good job with cyber hygiene across the board. And until they, decide to start taking it seriously, you're going to continue to see stories of healthcare organizations, doctors' offices, hospitals, medical facilities get hit with ransomware and other types of cyber attacks. And your patient information is what's at risk here. That's what they want. That's what ends up on the dark web, and that's what gets sold and traded. If you don't know, or you haven't paid attention to any of our previous podcasts, we've talked about this. The amount of money they get for one medical record versus, say, a credit card or somebody's personal information for the purposes of performing credit or identity fraud in that way to get loans or to get credit. They pay 10 to 100 times more for a medical record than they do for some kind of financial or personal record for an individual. So this stuff is highly, when they steal it, they can make a lot of money off it in other ways other than, holding you hostage or ransom.
Yep.
And that's why they're willing to go at lengths to figure out how to beat your defenses, but you really don't have any defenses for them to beat. So you're making it easy for them at the end of the day.
It's like they're digging for gold. Sorry, Andre, go ahead.
No, I was just saying, yes, that's all.
It's like they're digging for gold, Brian, and they know that this data that we keep talking about on the show, the data is the gold, and that if they can get a hold of it, there's multiple ways to make money off of it, by simple ways, by selling it, little more complex ways, like by using AI to do targeted phishing campaigns. We say it all the time. If they had 1 million leaked records from a hospital, they could send an X-ray bill to all million of them, and probably 500 people would pay the bill. Easy, without even asking. They're just busy. They would just whip out a credit card and just pay the dang bill, especially if it wasn't too much. And it's funny. I was thinking about this when you started talking about the article, Brian. It's funny that it's 2025. The HIPAA rules, and in Texas, we've got like our own version of that. And I'm sure y'all do in your states too. How long have those been around now? Like what, 20 years, 25 years? Like, and what do those rules talk about? They're laws that talk about protecting customer data. Yet here we are, 2025, 90% of these systems have 90+% of these organizations have huge vulnerabilities. It's crazy.
So just Taz, appreciate the comment here. I think that was a couple articles ago where he mentioned use AI to analyze audit user accounts, especially elevated privileges. Luke jumping in saying he works in healthcare space on a current contract. We had an email sent out recently which warned us about hackers trying to message internal staff on Teams. Oh. He said, it made me think of an episode of yours recently where you said how easy it is for hackers to do, and you're 100% right. Although Microsoft supposedly is building protections for these types of things. It's a cat and mouse game, folks. You know what I mean? Like, as soon as those protections go in, these guys are going to be working to figure out ways to get around them and get inside.
And that one's super easy to fix. What Luke is talking about in Teams in the admin portal, just go under the user and then just make it trust, right? So I'm not going to go into all the details.
Going into an Azure tutorial. No,
that's right.
So here we go, guys. Sam's Club, purportedly a victim of the Clop ransomware group. They are obviously owned by Walmart, and they're investigating claims. At least they're investigating and not completely ignoring it like we see a lot of companies do. They are investigating claims by Clop, who came out and said that they stole sensitive employee and customer data from Sam's Club. And the Clop ransomware group has said that they exploited a vulnerability in the Clio file transfer software, raising questions about supply chain security. We know that Clio is a problem, just like the Move It file transfer issue that happened. When this came out, we all said on the show that this is going to basically be the same thing. These guys just have to go around and find these servers across the internet.
Yep.
Sometimes they're not so easy to find, but when they do find them, if they're not updated, you're going to pay the price. And it sounds like that's what happened with Sam's Club here. Again, it's just a matter of time before these guys find, what's behind your IP address and figure out that you're using something that's vulnerable, and they're going to take advantage of it, whether it's Clio, whether it's a Fortinet firewall, whether it's a SonicWall firewall, all which had major vulnerabilities disclosed in the last week or two that hackers are fully taking advantage of at this point in time right now. So, the vulnerabilities in these third-party programs are a thing that you have to deal with in your business. If you're going to buy technology, right, you have to deal with vulnerabilities. You can't ignore them, or you will become a victim, right?
You mentioned earlier in the show talking about legacy systems and being afraid to update. People, sometimes they're afraid to update because it might break the system. Like maybe there are updates available. And this particular vulnerability in the Clio software was first made public back at the beginning, first third-ish of December of 2024. So we're talking 3-4 months ago that it's been out. You should patch it if you have it. I know there is a fear of sometimes patching will break stuff, but I would say 99.9% of the time, you're better off patching and then deal with the results if it breaks something rather than holding off because you're afraid that it might break something, especially dealing with Clio, this software, because it has an internet-facing aspect to it potentially. that the bad guys can find using tools that are commonly available out there.
Business owners can't catch a break, right?
Nope.
They
Buy crappy technology, and then they have to deal with the crappy technology.
Exactly,
right?
right? Yeah.
That's the reality of it, but that's the reality of the world we live in right now, right? These companies could do a better job of putting out better hardware and software, but they don't have to. And the result of that is businesses of all sizes have to invest the money in making sure that these things remain operational and secure. Otherwise, you're going to get hacked, and that's the reality of the world we live in, unfortunately. So we could solve this problem, at the top, but we choose not to, and then everybody at the bottom has to deal with it, right? So,
and even our next article, the cyber, the cyber company gets hacked too. So.
Yes, sir. So we'll move right into that. Checkpoint Software has denied claims by hackers, which is a bad idea, as we've proven over and over, that sensitive internal data was breached and is being sold online. The company insists that it's an old known event involving recycled data. That's exactly what Oracle said. But cybersecurity experts remain skeptical. Checkpoint denies the breach claims. So,
and hold on, just by old, they mean December 2024.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, so 5 months ago.
Yeah, so it's like, oh, that's from an old hack. We already, we see that often. I mean, companies that have been hacked before will go, oh no, that was from the old hack. That was from the hack before. Like, that makes it any better. So, how should companies handle? Because we're seeing it kind of left and right. I mean, it's three different occasions this week where the cyber criminal group came out before the business and said, we got you. And the companies were like, no, you didn't. Right? So how should companies handle these public allegations? Because if you kind of come out from the get and say, no, you didn't, or this was an old hack, and then somebody proves that, no, I'm in your system right now, that doesn't sound, I mean, I don't want to be doing business with a company that can't figure out if they got hackers in their network. Do you?
No, but it's also not easy just moving from one company to another, because usually you protest with your dollars, right? But you can't necessarily do it that quick.
And I mean, so Checkpoint also, any business, even a cybersecurity company, needs to be transparent, not try to downplay or make people look the other way. Just be transparent and move on. We all know vendors in this, and that's what Checkpoint is. They're a vendor in this vertical, if you will, of cybersecurity. We all know vendors that have had incidents that dealt with them the right way, and that actually can build trust with your company. With your customers. And we've all known vendors that have done it in a less than transparent way. I'm not going to name names, but I dropped those with like a hot freaking potato, because if they're not going to be transparent about it, then they can't be trusted. But this whole thing, it's not a matter of when you're going to have a cybersecurity incident. It's not a matter of if, it's a matter of when. And so when you have one, you just need to be transparent about it and deal with it openly. That will build trust, not take away trust.
Yes, sir. So, I mean, the risk of downplaying. What was that?
I was going to say, although Checkpoint might be telling the truth here, it might be old data, and it might be false claims.
You're falling for the fake news, man. Come on. So, cha-ching. So,
your day.
The risks of downplaying the breaches are just not good, right? So, it's just best, in my opinion. Hey, look, just don't say anything until you know, right? Don't come out and say these things. And unfortunately, we see it in a lot of different areas when it comes to cybersecurity, not only with breaches, even when I've mentioned it before, even when like threat hunters or bounty hunters, they go to companies and disclose that they found something. It's like pulling teeth sometimes to get some of these guys to believe that their own stuff has vulnerabilities in it that can be exploited to, a level of like somebody has full control of the system. So sometimes it's really hard to get through to people as a result, and they don't want to believe that, the system that they designed and built actually has flaws in it and got hacked. And that's part of the psychology of what you deal with a lot of times when it comes to this stuff. So try to see through that. Try to have non-technical people involved in the team of evaluating these different scenarios that can come your way, whether it's a hacking group saying that they got you, or a cybersecurity researcher saying that they, did research and found a flaw in your system. When you have all technical people involved, you tend to have those egos get in the way. And sometimes it's good to have somebody on the team who can look at it and go, not look at it from an ego standpoint and just say, hey, maybe we need to take a deeper look at this, or look at this another way, or bring in outside help to look at this to see. Those are all options you can do to figure this out before you come out and say, it's not what they say it is. All right, guys, moving right along. We have this other interesting article. Do we have this one? It's the same one, right? Checkpoint, or is it just a different one?
No, next one is the doctor.
Local doctor.
All right. So someone is saying that they have the Checkpoint stuff for sale. I guess I pulled that one up too. Okay. And then this one, give me 1 second. For some reason, I'm getting a healthcare article, not the one you guys want.
I'll put it in the chat.
I got it. In the meantime, great, Randy. Mike says we're doing a great job. So there we go. Thanks, Mike.
Awesome.
Appreciate the support there.
Right.
So here we go. Local doctor, guys, hit by a ransomware attack. They're struggling to save their practice after discovering his cyber insurance policy doesn't cover critical aspects of the recovery, which I've mentioned many times on this show. This story obviously highlights the gaps in, IT management, insurance coverage, and these are the things that leave business vulnerable when they don't understand what their coverage is, what their IT company is doing. And if those two things aren't working together, then the business is going to end up being left holding the bag at the end of the day, or at least, temporarily, unless they can find recourse against their IT company as part of their losses. But at the end of the day, that's a pain in the ass to go through in the first place. Wouldn't you rather just have, your policy pay out? And, just think about it. You can go from, an unfortunate event, cyber insurance comes into play, helps you through that event, you get back up on your feet and you're running, versus a situation where you realize your cyber insurance isn't going to pay. And now you have to go through a whole other series of lawsuits to try to recoup it from, the parties that may have aided in the event in the first place, like a MSP or an IT company not doing their job, right? So what's going on here, guys? Why do so many organizations, misunderstand their cyber insurance policies, and also, put that kind of blind trust in their IT that they're doing everything, and then find out through unfortunate events like this that neither of those were true?
Yeah, in this case, this doctor, he seemed to have recovered, but he's also considering, just joining a bigger group, because he, just based on the pictures, he looks like he's in his 60s. And, the last thing you want to do as you're winding down your career is to now deal with a cyber attack. And it also mentioned that he came 6 figures, out of his pocket. So he spent at least $100,000 of either losses or to recover from this. So I know a lot of times, you get your insurance policy and you trust your agent, and, you want the best price. And sometimes you just don't ask the questions as far as what does this really cover? And to the doctor's defense, he's a doctor. He's not did his IT guy look over the contract and help him ask questions as far as, okay, if there was a ransom, how much is the policy going to pay? It seems that maybe, being that he lost his patient's data, he wasn't able to do, the full treatments for things. So now how many days was he down? where he couldn't get revenue, and that, what is that called, like a business loss policy. So there's a lot of things that most likely he just saw the price, he okayed it, he trusts the insurance person, nobody looked at the application, he didn't ask the right questions, and now he found himself at least $100,000 in the hole.
And I think that's really good. And to add on to that, Brian, it goes back to this whole thing of we don't have ransomware is not part of our cultural consciousness yet, where we all kind of know what it is. So like on your car insurance policy, it says we won't cover gross negligence. And you don't have to be a lawyer to think up 15 things you could do that involve gross negligence that probably wouldn't be covered, because we have this, we've seen it all. We know people that, did all kinds of different, well, not necessarily know people. We've heard of people that did all kinds of things and that weren't covered because it was a gross negligence. Well, the cyber insurance companies are considering things like not having MFA, gross negligence. Why should we cover it if you don't have MFA? Not having endpoint security, gross negligence. Why should we cover it if you don't have endpoint security? Not having firewalls. Like we could go down this really long list that over there on their side, they talk about every day. They have conferences, on the insurance side. They all know what gross negligence means as far as it relates to cybersecurity. But out here in the real world, a lot of people don't have any idea. That's one point. And also, I was doing some research, Brian, for some like marketing. I was doing some research on Google search intent of what people are looking for and their frustrations. IT providers in the top 5. Now, this may have just been my one search, may have been that one day. One of their frustrations was they didn't know what their IT company was doing in general. And another one in the top 5, they didn't know what their IT company was doing as it relates to security in general. So they may not be vocalizing it, but business owners are already thinking in the back of their head, is our IT company doing enough? We don't really know what they're doing. We have poor communication, which was another top 5. And then we don't know what they're doing with security. So I think
well, let's not paint these people as victims, because I've had conversations with many of these people and they choose to bury their head in the sand. And it doesn't have to do with just IT, third-party IT companies, MSPs. I've seen it where companies have IT departments and the CEO just shoves everything over to the IT department. They don't want to deal with technology. I get it. They want to basically have it work like the water coming out of the faucet. They just want to go over, turn it on. It better work when they go to use it. And when it's, when it doesn't turn on, that's when it's an issue, right? And that's what everybody, nobody thinks about their water coming out of their faucet unless it doesn't come out when you turn it on. Then it becomes a problem, right? So, and that's the same thing with IT. And that's how, and unfortunately, that is, nobody's hacking your pipes. Nobody's hacking your water, right? People are hacking your businesses, right?
Right.
And you have to pay attention to this stuff. You cannot, delegate it out to somebody else 100% and have no involvement.
Right. And I'm definitely not trying to paint anybody as victims. I'm just saying that Google search intent shows that it's on people's minds. Sure. Are their IT companies really doing enough? And if it's on your mind, they're probably not.
Sure, but it's kind of like they shot themselves in the foot, right?
Right.
Like they're asking those questions because they created that scenario in their business. It's their business.
Yep.
Like, why are you asking those questions? It's almost like they're being held hostage by the company that they chose to do business with. Like, oh, we don't know what they're doing. It's like, why not?
Right.
Like, pick up the phone and call them and ask them what they're doing. If they don't provide a good answer, go find a company that does provide those answers. And, here's a hint. Some of them provide them very proactively. And that might be the kind of company you need at this point.
You're right. And you kind of nailed it, right? One of the first things you said was stick their head in the sand, and business owners are really good at that, or they probably wouldn't be business owners. They can avoid reality to keep pressing forward. And we want to say on the show, don't make that what you do. You don't want to miss this reality. You want to engage with your IT company. You want to make sure that your stuff is cyber secure, not just ask. And then from some antisocial IT guy, just go, yeah, you want to know the details. You need to know what's going on. Get a cybersecurity risk assessment. It's a great way to find out what's going on in your business.
Yeah, it's going to tell you whether your policy is going to pay out or not. Because if you have anything adverse that comes back from a cybersecurity risk assessment done by a third party, don't trust your own people or own company to do it themselves. Crazy enough, they might tell you something that's not true just to save their own butt, right? So get a third party independent assessment done, and then right? And there's no reason any IT company who's ethical and worth their weight will welcome a third party risk assessment if they can't already offer you a third party company that they already work with to do this on their behalf, right? So good stuff there, guys. Last article of the day. Good work. Riding in on an hour here of the show. Fake Zoom installer. This is an interesting one. I saw this one yesterday. This goes through with that whole users being users, right? And them just searching, instead of going to zoom.com and maybe logging into an account that they have from their company or their own Zoom account to download the installer, people do what people do, and they go to Google or they open up a tab and it's automatically set to a search. They type in install Zoom, or maybe they'll get an email that looks like it came from Zoom and it's saying, hey, you have to update your Zoom. Click here, right? It's one of two ways that this could happen. But how does a fake Zoom installer actually get installed? Well, people do these things, right? They click on phishing emails that look like they came from Zoom. They go on Google or Bing and they search Zoom, and something pops up as a sponsored search, and they click on it, and it ends up going to a fake Zoom website set up by a hacker. It looks like Zoom, feels like Zoom. Here, download the new Zoom, download the Zoom update. They click on it, boom, and now they're downloading some black suit malware that's at the end of the day, it's like a Swiss Army knife of malware for hackers to basically have all the tools at their disposal that they need to take control of your network and then deploy ransomware.
But more importantly, it still installs the legitimate Zoom that you're looking for.
It does.
So that way you don't think anything, right?
This is nothing new, right?
Right.
I mean, anybody back in the day who used to mess around with LimeWire and stuff, this is the same stuff. People thought that they were downloading free music, and it was all piggybacked with this kind of crap, right?
Yeah.
So this is nothing new. This is old school tactics being used for new school reasons, right? To deploy ransomware.
So when you were 19, downloading the latest Eminem song, and it ended in .exe instead of MP3, and it got you? Is that what you're saying?
No, they didn't get me because I knew not to download, and I was downloading Wu-Tang, not Eminem.
I remember those LimeWire sites. You can actually type because they would be sharing your downloads folder or your documents folder, however you set it up. And I would search for, and I wasn't even in the IT back then. And I would search social security number and things like that. And you could actually see people because it was right there. It was like a big flaw.
Right.
So people let them, but that's the whole point is even back then, you let them right in, right? Why would you want to share? Because you would share your music library. But, so it would be your music folder on your computer. But then if you put documents in there or something like that, you just opened it up to the whole world.
Yep. Crazy.
Yep. So be careful what you download, right? Make sure you're implementing things like DNS filters and web content filtering. So if by chance a user that you manage happens to click on one of these things, maybe your technology can prevent that actual page from actually loading, and you'll prevent them from downloading these things. But at the end of the day, those things, are hit or miss. They work sometimes, and sometimes the sites are so new, the URLs change so frequently that it's hard to keep up, and these tools aren't foolproof, and hackers know this. I saw yesterday a story about a phishing as a service website that hackers have set up, right? And the URLs that these phishing emails link to, for the actual. So essentially, you can go on, you can buy the emails, buy the service that sends the emails, buy the website that hosts the landing page, right? And then the URLs for the landing pages change all the time, right? So essentially, the web content filters can't block these sites because they're constantly changing. Right, so these are some of the tactics that these cyber criminals use. So it evades these things. So you have to train your users on these things. And you have to let them know in your security awareness training that there are these fake Zoom installers, and you have to be careful. And what's the proper way to actually go to Zoom and download an installer? Your IT, number one, should be updating Zoom in the background for your users in the first place. That's the safest way, right? They push the updates when necessary. Your users don't even have to worry about it or install anything, right? And then the other thing is like just letting people know that these things exist, and if they have to, if you don't have the ability to update their software behind the scenes, like a lot of companies do, then make sure you give them a way to follow a process so they know that they have to go to zoom.com, type that into their browser, not do a search in Google, and go and log into their account and download the downloader from there, right? Don't download it from a site that you're not logged into or something along those lines. And these are things that you have to train your users on to that level of detail if you don't want to become a victim of something like this.
Yeah, and don't try this at home, but I was talking to Randy and I asked him to try he's on a Mac, right? So it's more secure. So I said, hey, Randy, go to zoommanager.com, which is what one of the articles is saying is one of the malicious sites. And he got 2 blocks. The first one was from his Windows Defender. And then even if he was allowed to bypass that, Randy had a second line of defense that would have also blocked it. So protect your users as well. They're not always.
Taz on our last topic, Randy, Taz threw in a comment saying need to execute a biannual tabletop for ransomware attacks to test the process as well as the recovery plan to include an extended outage. I will say I agree with you, but geez, let's just get them to do the risk assessment first. Tabletops are, that's a pipe dream for a lot of us IT compliance people to get companies to do them on a regular basis, faithfully.
Yeah, that's more like a once every 5 years type of thing, and that's after something happens.
Yeah, we do tabletops. Yeah. All right, guys, good show. Thank you for your inputs. Any last words before we wrap it up? All good.
No, looks like we're gonna be in an undisclosed location in 2 weeks, so that's gonna be fun. Honing our AI skills.
Andre's excited.
Yeah.
Well, you guys have fun with that. I'll be sticking in my normal location.
All right.
I'll see you guys next week. And remember, share the show, and we'll see everyone. Thanks for the engagement, and we'll see everyone next week. Take care.
Take care.
Bye.